5 of Fill Paper Roulette, where I pick a random paper from the interwebs and review it, and you get my first take feedback. Basically it. I think I might have got my audio issues worked out, for better or worse. You are gonna hear some of the music, at least I think now, but we'll find out later. Alright, so last time we actually did Sideways Music, that was earlier today. Oh, look at that, he got 400 downloads. Yeah, it's a cutesy title, and it's a clever paper. It wasn't that bad. You could check it out if you want. It was a pretty easy read, too. So, let's see, scorekeeping. An influential suggestion from D. Lewis is that we should think of assertions in terms of how they affect the conversational score. This note outlines a way to model conversational scores in such a way that two assertoric effects are brought together. That to assert is to propose to add information to the common ground. Don't care. Wondering about what you know. Let's see. Pathological pretending. Reality making. Easy ontology. Did I look at this already? Authenticity and aesthetic experience of history, kinds of monsters, and kinds of compositionality. Compositionality and monsters. Let's see. In response to Stefano Predelli's article, Finding in Kaplan's Demonstrative a Distinction Between Constant Shifting Monsters and Operators on Character, I argue that context shift. Let's not context shift. Let's just don't do that. Just stop. I mean, you can shift stuff, but context is, I have not much patience for context talk. Like, you can do it, but just a itsy little bit. Is there a deductive argument for semantic externalism? Reply to Lee Vacquerie. Causal powers, review of, straight thinking in warped environments. The delusive illusion of passage. Again, okay, so time doesn't exist yet again. Shocking. Okay. Essays, a review. Why be coherent? Yeah, it's kind of overrated. Naive realist theory of color. I don't feel like thinking about realism. We just did realism in the last paper. Justification. Shrieking in the face of vengeance. Shrieking. Paraconsistent dilith. Oh, we just talked about dilethism in the previous one too, so we're not going to bother with that. What is a quantifier? Nah. Animalism. Brian Garrett. Well, let's see what animalism is, as opposed to personalism. Blur and Perceptual Content by Bence Nanay. Alright, so we've got two different possibilities here. Let's see. This one, have to go looking for it. This one is here. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Blur and Perceptual Content. By Bence Nanay. Don't know how to say it. University of Antwerp. Download from archive. So here we go. Let's see. Anything else to set up? No. Should be okay now. Might have to turn the lights on soon though. Getting towards evening here on the east coast of the United States. Blur and perceptual content. Intentionalism about visual experiences is the view according to which The phenomenal character of a visual experience supervenes on the content of this experience. Phenomenal character of visual experience supervenes. Okay, so supervenes means that the character can't change unless something underneath it changes. So the visual experience, the experience of the world supervenes on the world, is dependent on it. One of the most important counterexamples to intentionalism is the following. Seeing a fuzzy contour clearly and seeing a sharp contour blurrily have different phenomenal character but the same content. Okay, so you're being fooled about something being blurry, or you're being fooled about seeing a fuzzy contour, or you're right about seeing something fuzzy, or you're wrong about seeing something sharp because you're seeing it fuzzily, or you're seeing the fuzzy sharply. Okay, so we got a little bit of a gettier on the visual. It's like you're fuzzy for the right reasons or unfuzzy for the wrong reasons. Hence, the phenomenal character of perceptual experience cannot supervene on the content of this experience, as and the two have the same content, yet they have different phenomenal character. Okay, so you're multiply realizing the same experience, the same phenomenal character, but a different underlying content. Okay. Argue that if we accept simple and not particularly controversial way of thinking about perceptual content, then we have no reason to suppose that these two experiences have the same content. I then compare my proposal about Blur with Michael Tye's seemingly similar account and point out that they are in fact very different, so much so that my proposal can give adequate answers to the two most important objections Tye's account faces. Okay. I'm not even sure about, we'll have to see what this whole setup is, because how do you measure the identity of perceptual experiences? Like compare and contrast. Compare the following two experiences. First, I'm looking at a fuzzy contour, say a blurry photograph, and I see the photograph clearly. Second, I am looking at a clear contour. I see this contour blurrily because I don't have my glasses on. The original objection to intentionalism was that these two experiences have the same content but different phenomenal character. Hence, the phenomenal character of perceptual experience cannot supervene on the content. There are two ways of attacking this objection to intentionalism. One would be to deny the two experiences have different phenomenal character. Okay, I think I said something similar to this. I will not do this. Disagreements about phenomenology are notoriously difficult to settle, so that those who want to defend intentionalism are better off accepting, for the sake of argument, that the two experiences differ in their phenomenal character. Okay, so one of them is just too hard, so let's not do that because we're not there yet. Maybe someday in the future. The other strategy is to deny that they have the same content. Yeah, so there are many ways of doing this, listing bunch, but regardless of which of these versions we consider, the success of this general strategy clearly depends on how we think about perceptual content. Yes, this was kind of what I said also. I think did I say this one or the other one? I don't remember. In the next section, I outline a straightforward account of perceptual content. Then in section 4, I argue that if we accept way of thinking about perception, analysis, Blur poses no problem for intentionalism. Accept this way of thinking about perceptual content, Blur poses no problem for intentionalism. In section 5, I contrast my account with Michael Tye's. Perceptual content. Consider the following very simple and not particularly controversial way of thinking about perceptual content. I always get worried when people start saying how simple or uncontroversial stuff it is. I mean, how do I know they're not going to say something really stupid next, but I just am missing it because I'm getting distracted over here by the don't look at this, it's not particularly controversial thing. Our perceptual apparatus attributes various properties to various parts of the perceived scene. Yeah, I have no idea. I don't even know what that means. What the heck is a property that my perceptual apparatus attributes? Perceptual content is partly constituted by the sum total of the properties attributed to the perceived scene. Yeah, I don't know what that is. The question is what kind of properties are being attributed to the perceived scene. Okay, so we've got some sort of property theory here, and scene theory that has properties. Yeah, see, I'm sure philosophers all agree on this, but I don't understand because, well, that's me. One way of characterizing the relation between properties is their determinable determinate relation. To use a classic example, being red is determinate of being colored, but determinable of being scarlet. There are many ways of being red, and being scarlet is one of these. Okay, so it's a class and then a particular. So, for something to be scarlet is for it to be red in a specific way. If something is red, it is also to be a certain specific shade of red. There is no such thing as being red simplicator. The determinate relation is a relative one. The same property, for example, being red can be determinate of the determinable being colored, but determinable of the determinate being scarlet. Thus, the determinate gives us a hierarchy of ordering of properties in a given property space. Properties with no further determinants, if there are any, are known as superdeterminate. So, like absolute black or whatever, because that can't get any more black. Like 0 degrees Kelvin, I guess. You just can't get any more cold. Some of the properties we perceive attribute to the perceived scene are determinate or even superdeterminate. Some others, on the other hand, are determinable properties. We know that our peripheral vision is only capable of attributing extremely determinable properties. Yeah, so our peripheral vision can see some things, but not specifics. But even some of the properties we perceive attribute to the objects that are ever in our fovea can be determinable. It has been argued that this way of thinking about content with additional assumptions that the perceptual attention makes the attended property more determinable. Yeah, attention is something to think about. Helps us to explain away some other influential counterexamples to intentionalism, ones that have to do one way or another with attention. My aim here is to show that if we accept this, again, not particularly controversial, account of perceptual content, then we have a simple way of handling the alleged counterexample to intentionalism that blurry vision poses. Blur and determinacy. Okay. So we have this distinction. So we have this distinction here that will solve the problem with blurriness and accurately perceiving blurriness or inaccurately perceiving sharpness, and that they are somehow appear the same to us. Remember that the two experiences that pose a problem for intentionalism, looking at a blurry photograph clearly and looking at a clear contour blurrily. If we accept the account of perceptual content that I outlined in the last section, then these two experiences do not have the same content. When I see a fuzzy contour clearly, I attribute determinate, maybe superdeterminate properties to the fuzzy contour. When I see the sharp contour blurrily in contrast, I attribute determinable properties to the sharp contour. The content of these two perceptual episodes are very different. What? How do you know which one's which? How do you know which one's the determinable and one's the determinate? I mean, you're just claiming that on the get-go. I mean, like, is that given from down, like handed down from like the oracle? I mean, you can describe them this way after the fact, but when you're observing them the first time, how would you be able to tell? You don't know which one's determinate or determinable. Let's proceed more slowly and consider the ways in which perceptual states can represent the property of having a certain spatial location. A perceptual space can attribute determinate or determinable or determinate property instances of having a spatial location. When I am looking at or attending to the space bar of my laptop right in front of me, my perceptual state attributes a highly determinate, maybe even super determinate spatial location property to this object. But on many other occasions, say when I'm too far away from it or when I can only catch a glimpse of it in the periphery of my visual field, my perceptual state will attribute a determinable spatial location property to this object, the property of approximately what spatial region it is located in. So sometimes you know exactly where something is, like say I can see you can see my hand right here, but like if I go really fast over there, like maybe you don't quite know exactly where it is. Okay? My claim is that the difference between seeing a fuzzy contour clearly and a sharp contour blurrily is a difference of this kind. When I see a fuzzy contour clearly, my perceptual state attributes a specific highly determinate property to this contour. So it gives it a property, let's call that like a perceptual hexaity, and just the property of being unique in the determinate space. It may be blurry, but I see it as being a specific highly determinate spatial location. So it's got that hexatus uniqueness property of being determinate, highly determinate. I'm gonna go highly determinate. I'm gonna call this gotta write in script. Interesting. Hex, oopsie. Say, this is just terrible. Sorry, folks. Determinate. How do you do it? Say it. That's actually funny. Maybe we should have hexaity with an 8 in it. So that's what we're gonna. That's how I'm thinking of this. Ow. But when I see the sharp contour blurrily, my perceptual state attributes a determinable spatial location to this contour against this contour as being specific highly determinate spatial location. I see it as being an approximate determinate as being somewhere in the blurry looking spatial. Okay, so this is the determinable spatial thing. That's kind of, we're gonna call that a quiddity. Determinable quiddity. Okay. Oopsie. Put the extra space in there. So we've got the determinate hexaity and the determinable quiddity. Okay, because that's like the type of thing it is, but it needs to be more determinate, but it's not quite there, and the hexaity is the very specific one. I see it as being approximate determinable spatial location as being somewhere in the blurry looking space. In short, the difference between two experiences is the differences of the determinacy of the spatial location properties perceptually attributed to the perceptually attributed to the scene. When I see a fuzzy contour clearly, these properties are determinates. This is a bald statement. I do not see this being argued for yet. This is just like, let's what am I doing? Oh, there's a polygon. I'm sorry, the wrong thing. What is this? Straight line. Let's just highlight. Well, let's go on for a sec. When I see a sharp contour blurrily, they are determinables. As perceptual content is partly constituted by the sum total of their properties perceptually attributed to the perceived state, the perceptual content in these two scenarios are clearly different. Well, you define them as such. That does not make them as such. Oh, I'm bleeding. I scratched myself and now I'm bleeding. Thanks, desk. Hence, the fact that these two experiences have different phenomenal character, if they do, does not constitute a counterexample to intentionalism. Okay. Yeah, like, not entirely buying, like, these sort of things. See, when I see fuzzy contour clearly, these properties are determinates. Says who? Just says who? I mean, that's nice, but, like, says who? How bad? I'm only scratched. It's okay. Determinacy versus failure to comment. Michael Ty proposed a similar explanation of how the phenomenon of blurry vision is consistent with intentionalism. I aim to point out that my account is importantly different from Ty's. Did I call him Mike Tyson? I'm sorry, Mike. Both Tyson and Mike Ty. So that it can give adequate answers to the two most important objections to Ty's explanatory scheme. According to Ty, in seeing blurrily, one undergoes sensory representation that fails to specify where the boundaries and contours lie. Some information that was present with our eyes focused is now missing. Okay, so he's trying to give you some sort of extra mental content here. In short, one's visual experience makes no comment on where the exact boundaries lie. Alright, so you've got like a negative mental content. So you've got a hole that you're noticing in the seeing blurrily. In Ty's account, apparently. Dagnabbit. There are some similarities between my account and Ty's, in as much as both both deny that blurry vision attributes determinate properties, but there is a crucial ambiguity in Ty's account. Sometimes he seems to deny that any properties are represented. Yeah, see, that's the whole, that there's no property represented. It's a failure to comment, means to represent, but some other times he seems to allow for some represented properties. For example, when he talks about less definite information about surface depth, orientation, contours, and so forth. Sometimes, for example, when he says that my visual experience is silent on the precise locus of any of the edges, he seems to endorse the first no representation at all interpretation. Okay, so there are represented properties, less definite information, so it's like bad information versus lacking information, and that's the objection that author here, Bence, is pointing to. The second quote is from the previous paragraph, and kind of talks about failure to comment where exactly the boundaries lie. This sounds more like a similar view to that is defended here. Yes. Maybe is not a close analysis of Ty's text if his official view is that blurry vision fails to comment on the exact boundaries but does not comment on the approximate, that is, determinable boundaries, then his view is compatible with mine, and my view could be thought of as an elaboration of his. If his official view is that blurry vision fails to comment on the boundaries at all, exact or approximate, which seems to be the standard interpretation of Ty's view, then I will argue my view is preferable to Ty's. Alright, so yeah, he doesn't like the approximations. In fact, my account can easily answer the two most important objections to Ty's proposal, interpreted as a proposal of the failure to comment to court. The first objection to Ty's proposal, again interpreted as a proposal of failure to comment to court, is that, according to Ty, the difference between seeing a fuzzy contour clearly and seeing a sharp contour blurrily is not a difference of what is represented, but what is not represented. Yeah, that's what we were saying before, when like that's a whole versus seeing something badly. Thus, strictly speaking, it is not a representational difference that is intentionalists would need in order to argue that phenomenal character supervenes on perceptual content. Yeah, because different sort of thing. Fair enough. See Potts 2010 for a different assessment whether this explanation of blur is consistent with the bona fide intentionalism. If we accept my proposal, then the difference between seeing fuzzy contours and seeing a fuzzy contour clearly and seeing a sharp contour blurrily is in fact but a representational difference, a difference of what properties are being attributed to the perceived scene. In the former case, these perceptually attributed properties are determinate, whereas in the latter case they are determinable. The second objection is that if we accept Ty's analysis, seeing something blurrily and seeing something in the periphery of one's visual field would have the same content. It is true of both experiences that they fail to comment on where exactly the boundaries lie, but these two experiences with the same content have different phenomenology. Hence, the original objection can now be raised in the case of these two experiences, seeing a sharp contour blurrily and seeing in the periphery of one's visual field. They have the same content, but clearly different phenomenology, which means that, yeah, that's not fair. I mean, you're saying you're seeing it differently, and so it has a different phenomenology, but sure, but if you see something differently, then you're seeing it differently, which means the phenomenon does not supervene on perceptual content. Intentionalism is false. Well, it does not only supervene on perceptual content. I mean, come on. According to my proposal, there is a clear difference between the content of these two experiences. When I see well, no, you've defined it as such. I'm not buying that. I don't want to sound that hard on this. This is actually not a bad paper, but like I just disagree with the strategy being argued, the method of argumentation here. When I see a sharp contour blurrily, the spatial location property that is perceptually attributed to this contour is determinable. Well, says you. But as long as I'm attending to this contour and a number of other properties that are also perceptually attributed to this contour, for example, its color property will be determinate or even superdeterminate. In the case of peripheral vision, in contrast, our perceptual system can only be determinable properties to the objects seen in the periphery of one's visual field, not just determinable spatial location properties, but determinable color properties, shape properties, etc. Hence, we have a clear representational difference between blurry vision and peripheral vision. Representational difference. We have a clear representational difference. The former attributes determinable spatial location properties, but determinate color, shape, etc. properties. The latter only determinable a latter only attributes only determinable properties. The perceptual contents of these two perceptual episodes are very different. Okay, I think I covered my objections in the paper pretty well. Yeah. This is not that bad. This is good. I mean, this is a good distinction. The question is, I think a little bit more needs to be said about how these the phenomenology of determinable and determinate actually gets cashed out. So we can have more than just Bence's statement that when I see this, it happens to be this. So if this, then this. But why is that the case? Are you sure that you get the very particular at certain times versus the quiddity? I mean, that's the whole point with there being a problem, is that you can't tell the difference at different times. And so it seems like this is the distinctions being forced upon the phenomenal situation. But some more needs to be said, but I think the mostly right in the distinction, useful distinction, and so not a bad paper. Alright, any comments, suggestions, you let me know in comments and wherever else. Have a good day, stay safe, folks.